Most of us do one of two things with the grain effect on Fujifilm cameras. Either we leave it off because we just decided it's pointless, or we set it to strong large, and then we looked at it and thought, that's too noisy. And like before, we leave it off. But today's video might make you rethink this. Hi everyone, welcome to Pal to Tech. The grain effect is included with most newer Fujifilm camera models, and it's located in the IQ section of your menu. It's not a film simulation, nor is it the same thing as, that grain slider that you see here in Capture One. And also keep in mind that it will not touch your RAW file whatsoever. It'll only affect any JPEG or HEIF file that you choose to shoot with. And if you shoot in both RAW and JPEG, like I always recommend on the channel, you'll have two copies, one the JPEG that has the grain effect applied, and the original untouched RAW file that doesn't include the grain effect. So think of the grain effect as basically a finishing texture that your Fujifilm camera bakes right into the JPEG or the HEIF file before saving it out to your SD card. And once it's saved to the SD card, it's permanent and cannot be changed. Now, because it has no effect on RAW files, if you happen to open up the RAW file in, say, Capture One, you're not going to find a Fujifilm grain effect slider that you can adjust. This slider right here, you see where it says film grain? It is not the same thing as the film grain effect in your Fujifilm camera. So on the X-T5 and newer Fujifilm camera models, you've got two categories of settings for the grain effect: roughness and size. On an X-T3 or any earlier Fujifilm camera model, the grain effect setting in your menu only adjusts the roughness. There is no second category of size adjustment. So as far as these settings are concerned, and the grain effect in general, it's basically a layer of texture that's placed over your photo to give it a classic film look. The first setting, roughness, controls how much grain you get. Your choices are off, weak, and strong. And you should know right off the bat that weak on here is definitely weak. If you set it to weak, you're gonna have to really look to find the grain. However, strong makes that grain pretty obvious. So think of the roughness setting as sort of a big grain volume knob that turns it up or down. And the second part of the setting, size, controls how big or small each speck of grain is. So your sizes are large or small. Think of them like these, for example. Small grain is tight and fine, and large grain is chunky and coarse. Roughness is how much salt you shake out. So why is it that Fujifilm's internal camera-applied grain be better than using a plugin later on in post-production? Two words: film simulation. When a regular third-party plugin adds film grain to your photo, it layers it on as one fixed layer of texture that goes across the entire frame, and that's it. It calls it a day and it's done. Fujifilm doesn't work that way, okay? And that's because Fujifilm's in-camera grain effect is specifically tuned to whatever film simulation you're using. And here's the important part, it scales up with your ISO setting. In other words, it's reacting to the exposure and other components like film simulation of your photo. But not only that, if you shoot at higher ISO values, adding a bit of Fujifilm grain can blend with and actually disguise digital noise, which can actually improve your high ISO photos. And it's not just high ISO that can be improved, but also noise reduction. A light grain setting, such as say weak and small, can sometimes help hide the smearing and plasticky look from having too much noise reduction. But wait, there is more. Because Fujifilm's grain setting is applied before sharpening, you get a bonus round of more control over the final texture. The next time you're out shooting, I want you to try this. Add a -1 or -2 negative sharpness, and then combine that with a grain setting of, say, weak, roughness, and small size. It's a subtle way of adding a smooth, almost dithered texture that can give a gentle film look to your photos. And now we come to the part of the video with a very important point, okay? If you are shooting with ACROS film simulation, you need to treat things a bit differently. And that's because ACROS already has its own grain built into the film simulation, and that built-in grain will increase as your ISO climbs. So when you turn on the grain effect in ACROS, ACROS, you're basically stacking grain on top of grain that's already there. So helpful tip here, nudge it gently. A little bit goes a long way when it comes to ACROS. And finally, a couple of things I would watch out for. First, I would avoid using this setting combo right here. Strong and small together. Strong and small. I've found that that combination, particularly with ACROS, can look more like just noise and not film grain. And the second tip I have for you, be careful with future cropping, okay? Think about that. Grain size is baked into the JPEG, right, at the size that you choose. So say, for example, you're shooting and you set your grain to strong and large, and then you go and you crop in on your photo later on. What are you doing? You are enlarging the already large grain that's there. So for those of you with 40 megapixel sensors, if you think you're going to be definitely cropping in later on, I would recommend setting your grain effect to weak and small, and see how that goes. And finally, as I always say on this channel, shoot in both JPEG and RAW. This way, you get your JPEG with the grain effect baked in, but you also get that clean, original RAW file in case later on you decide you actually don't want that grain effect. A quick message, today's video is brought to you by me, paldetech.com/backstage. Go check it out, see what it's about. It helps support the channel. Now, back to the show. If you've not yet tried out the grain effect, I definitely think you should. And it's really used for one of two purposes, either for that creative effect you want to get, or fixing a little bit of the problems like too much noise reduction or too high an ISO. Try it out for both of those. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you found the video helpful, or at least entertaining. And if you did, be sure to give it the like and subscribe. I will see you in a new video very soon. Take care.